Hail fellow travelers, Tim from Secret Fire Books here with a slightly different kind of video. This is going to be a pretty simple, straightforward kind of video for two reasons. For one thing, it's just going to be a first impressions video. I just wanted to get my thoughts out about these two short stories that I read recently while they're still fresh in my mind. And for another thing, one of these stories was highly recommended to me by my good friend Brian from Bad Taste Books, whom you should all be subscribed to, by the way. Now, because I'm the kind of jerk who can't show any kind of affection towards my friends and loved ones without also making fun of them a little, I'm going to try to do this entire video in the style of Bad Taste Books. I'm going to try to do it all in one take. There's going to be minimal editing. You're going to get to see all the blemishes, all my hiccups, all the times I have to stop and catch my breath because I've been talking for way too long, way too quickly. I know that I'm not as effortlessly, ruggedly handsome as Brian, and I know I don't know any of the cool skateboard tricks that he likes to show off, but you guys are just going to have to bear with me. So let's get started.
Listen to them, children of the night. What music they make. They will be destroyed.
Time, monster. You don't belong in this world.
So I recently read two short stories by Clive Barker, a pretty famous, pretty popular horror writer by all accounts. I'd never read any of his stuff, though. To me, he's kind of just the Hellraiser guy. I know he's made much more than that. I know he's written a ton of stories. He's made a lot of movies, but I only really know him from Hellraiser. I've never read the short story, The Hellbound Heart, but I've seen Hellraiser, so that's the only bit of Clive Barker fiction that I am really familiar with. And honestly, I'm pretty ignorant to the horror genre in general. I've seen a lot of horror movies. I love horror movies, but when it comes to horror literature, I'm kind of a newbie. I've read some old school Gothic stuff like Edgar Allan Poe, and I just recently finished reading Dracula. And I've also read some, Weird Tales era pulp horror, H.P. Lovecraft and that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I really don't know my horror very well. I don't really know who's good and who's bad. And so recently I went to my local used bookstore and picked up this book, Clive Barker's Books of Blood, volumes 1, 2, and 3. I knew it was horror, and I wanted to get into more horror, so I picked it up. And then I took a picture of this book and sent it to a group chat with a bunch of my friends and asked, hey, would you guys recommend this? Because I just don't know. I know it's horror, but I don't know if it's any good. And Brian texted me back and said, and I believe these were his words verbatim, Books of Blood is the greatest horror literature ever written. And I was like, dang, okay, that's quite an endorsement. I'll have to check these out. And I started flipping through the table of contents, and I saw that one of the short stories in the first volume was The Midnight Meat Train. And I remember catching bits of the movie Midnight Meat Train at some point, but I didn't know that it was a Clive Barker story. I knew it was based on a short story. I didn't know it was Clive Barker. So I was interested in checking that one out because I remember the premise being pretty interesting. And then Brian actually recommended that I read another story from the first volume titled In the Hills, the Cities. He said that was his favorite story from the first volume of Books of Blood. And so I read both of those, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on them. So like I said, the first one I read was The Midnight Meat Train. This is a story that takes place in New York City. During this kind of scandalous series of events, there's this serial killer who's been murdering people on this particular subway line. And not only does he kill people, he shaves their bodies clean, he butchers them, drains them of their fluids, and then literally hangs them up from the ceiling on meat hooks like they're, slaughtered livestock. And so he earns the name The Butcher from the general public. And they're obsessed with, these stories and theorizing on who this guy is and what his motives are. And so our main character is this kind of dorky office worker who, while coming home from work one night after a really late shift, he ends up sure enough, on the same train as the butcher, this brutal serial killer. And I won't talk too much about the actual plot because it's pretty short and I don't want to spoil it. But needless to say, it is not just a story about a serial killer on a train. It actually goes into some kind of Lovecraftian cosmic horror territory that I really appreciated. I really like the story. Both of these stories I really enjoyed, and they really stuck with me after I read them. And so, like I said, the second one that I read was In the Hills, the Cities. This was Brian's favorite from the Books of Blood. And I can see why. This story takes place somewhere in Eastern Europe. I want to say it's Yugoslavia, but I don't know. I just read this story last night, but I forget where it takes place. It doesn't matter. The point is, it takes place somewhere in Eastern Europe with these two fictional cities located in the mountains. They're neighbors. They're not that far from each other. They can actually see each other from where their boundaries are. And these two cities have this sort of custom where every 10 years they hold a contest. And this contest involves every single member of these two cities. And I do mean every single member. Women, men, children, elderly, infirmed, every single person who lives in these cities, they get together. And it's kind of hard to explain. Because at first, as Clive Barker is describing it in the story, I wasn't sure I was getting what it was until a few pages in. I was like, oh, no, this is actually what's going on. So all these people, these tens of thousands of people, they strap themselves to each other. They put on these harnesses and ropes and tie themselves to each other and then climb on top of each other. And essentially, they build giants out of their bodies. They form like these huge human pyramids that take the form of giants. And every single member of the city is a part of this giant body that's all tied together. So there are people that are designated as fingertips or teeth or eyes. You know, whole bunches of people tie themselves to each other to form limbs and torsos and heads. And so the contest is to see, I'm assuming, to see who can build the best giant out of tying all their bodies together. It's this really surreal kind of thing. But they point out earlier in the story that one of the cities lost their chief architect, this old woman who, for the past 60 years, was kind of in charge of organizing the building of this giant for this one particular city. And the person who's taken her place is her daughter, who isn't nearly as experienced. And so sure enough, while they're building this giant, these villagers are building this giant out of their bodies, something goes wrong. And their giant starts falling apart. And oh my gosh, this, guys, I won't say what happened specifically, but this might be one of the goriest, most gruesome horror stories I've ever read. And the kind of funny thing is that for the majority of the story, we're actually following this gay couple from England who are vacationing in this part of Eastern Europe. And it's kind of just them encountering the horrible things that have happened as a result of this giant human sculpture falling apart. It's so brutal and messed up, and yet I kind of loved it. It's ridiculous. The thing about Clive Barker's writing is that, and I talked about this a little bit with Brian earlier today, his prose is really, really great. He has this workman-like prose that can be pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but every once in a while he will give you a paragraph that is just so vividly, poetically written, and it always has to do with the most grisly, gruesome, messed up stuff. And it paints these just horrible images in your brain. He really is a great horror writer. I'm going to have to dig into these books further because, yeah, from what little I've read so far, I was really impressed. See, I told you you'd have to bear with me while I catch my breath sometimes. But anyway, yeah, I really, really like his writing style. And the other thing is he definitely has this kind of super dark, macabre sense of humor. At one point in one of these stories, a character has his tongue ripped out of his face. And as Clive Barker is describing this, he says he was speechless. And in that moment, I stared at the page. I'm like, dude, are you serious? Like, that's funny, but that is so mean. That is so messed up. But I loved it. Yeah, it's some really gruesome, messed up stuff that he writes. I've heard from some people that his horror can go a little too far. So far I haven't seen anything that goes too far. It's just really shocking and really horrific. But who knows? There might be something in this book that kind of turns my bowels, as it were. Well, I'm never going to say that on a video again. The point is, as disgustingly macabre as these stories were, I really, really enjoyed them. I'd highly recommend them to anyone who's looking for some really ghastly horror short stories to read. And I'm glad I picked this book up. And I'm glad Brian recommended In the Hills, the Cities, because, yeah, I was kind of blown away by that story. The Midnight Meat Train was good, but In the Hills, the Cities was just... it was mind-blowingly good. So, yeah, I'm going to probably dig into the rest of, at least the first volume of this book sometime later this month. So, yeah, that's the video. Those are my first impressions on Clive Barker and his disgustingly horrific writing style. So, until next time, as always, farewell and keep reading.